Welcome to my channel. If you're new, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. It only takes a second, but it gives us motivation to create more stories. So please like this video. Now let's start the story. I never imagined I would find myself in this situation, telling a story that I never thought would be mine. I was the kind of woman who believed in love, in marriage, in the vows we took before our families and before the world. I believed in the kind of loyalty that should never waver, no matter the temptations that life throws in our path. And yet, here I am, unraveling the truth of how everything changed, how I changed, and how the boundaries I thought were unbreakable blurred into something I never expected. My name is Anna. I have been married to Ryan for 7 years. We met in college, one of those love stories that felt straight out of a novel. He was charming, intelligent, and kind in ways that made me feel like I had won a rare and precious love. We built a life together, one that looked perfect from the outside, a house in a quiet neighborhood, careers that kept us busy but fulfilled, and friends who felt like family. Among those friends was Ethan. Ethan had been a part of Ryan's life long before I entered the picture. They had been best friends since high school, inseparable in ways that made me respect their friendship. When I married Ryan, I gained Ethan as an extension of our life. He was always around, weekend barbecues, game nights, even quiet dinners where he would show up unexpectedly just to talk. I liked him, but he was always Ryan's friend first. That was the line I never thought would be crossed. It started subtly, so much so that I didn't even realize when the first shift happened. Maybe it was in the way Ethan would listen to me when I spoke, his eyes holding on to my words longer than they should have. Maybe it was the way he noticed things, how I changed my hair, how I seemed tired after a long week, how I laughed less than I used to. Ryan was a good husband, but he was busy. His work demanded long hours, and when he was home, he was often too exhausted to notice the little things. I never held it against him. That was life. That was marriage. But Ethan noticed. The first time I really felt something stir inside me was on an evening that should have been ordinary. Ryan was out of town for work, and Ethan had stopped by to drop off something he had borrowed from us. I invited him in for a quick cup of coffee, thinking nothing of it. We sat in the kitchen, talking about everything and nothing, the way friends do. But there was something different in the air that night, an unspoken tension that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. It was the way his eyes lingered on me, the way he listened, as if my words were the most important thing in the world. It was the way he laughed at my jokes, the kind of laughter that felt genuine and warm. And it was the way he said my name softly, as if it carried a meaning he hadn't realized before. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly seen. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was nothing, that Ethan was simply a good friend who cared. But as the days passed, I started noticing more, the way his presence made my heart beat a little faster, the way I looked forward to his texts, the way I found myself wondering about him when he wasn't around. It was dangerous, and I knew it, but I didn't stop. I should have stepped back. I should have created distance. But instead, I let it continue, telling myself that there was no harm in it, that as long as nothing was said, nothing was done, then it wasn't real. But emotions don't follow logic. They grow in the spaces we don't guard, in the moments we let linger longer than they should. And that's exactly what happened. One evening, Ryan had invited Ethan over to watch a game. It was one of their traditions, something they had done for years. I was in the kitchen preparing snacks when Ethan walked in. It was just the two of us for a moment, the sound of the television playing in the background. He leaned against the counter, watching me, and for a second neither of us said a word. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "You're different lately." I looked up at him, forcing a small smile. "Different how?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know, just something." I wanted to laugh it off, to brush it away, but the way he looked at me made my breath catch. There was something in his expression that mirrored everything I had been feeling, but had been too afraid to acknowledge. I turned away, focusing on the tray in front of me, trying to steady myself. Ryan called from the living room, breaking whatever moment had just passed. Ethan stepped back, giving me space, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But I knew then that this was more than just a passing thought. Something was happening between us, something neither of us had spoken aloud, but both of us felt. Over the next few weeks, everything seemed to shift. I found myself thinking about Ethan more than I should have, replaying our conversations in my mind, analyzing the way he looked at me, the way he spoke to me. I knew it was wrong, I knew it was dangerous, but I also knew that there was something undeniable growing between us. One evening, when Ryan was working late, Ethan texted me. It was simple, just a question about something trivial, but my heart raced when I saw his name on my phone. We ended up texting back and forth for hours, our conversation moving from casual to something deeper, something unspoken but understood. He made me laugh, made me feel light in a way I hadn't in a long time. And when he finally said goodnight, I stared at my phone for a long time, knowing that I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't take back. I wish I could say I made the right choice then, that I stepped away before it went too far, but the truth is, emotions are rarely that simple. I was caught in something I didn't fully understand, something that made me feel alive in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. And that was only the beginning. I wish I could say that I walked away after that night, that I saw the danger in the path I was treading and turned back before it was too late, but the truth is I didn't. I told myself it was harmless, that nothing had really happened. A few texts, a lingering glance, a moment in the kitchen that we both ignored. The next time we saw each other, that's what I told myself. But deep down I knew better. I started looking forward to seeing Ethan in a way that made my stomach twist with guilt. It wasn't just that he noticed me, it was that he saw me. He saw the parts of me that had started to fade in the routine of my marriage. Ryan was a good husband, but he was busy. His mind was always occupied with work, responsibilities, the endless list of things that needed to be done. I never blamed him for that. Life was demanding, and marriage wasn't always exciting. But with Ethan, it felt different. With him, I felt like I was more than just a wife, more than just someone who kept things running while Ryan was away. I tried to act normal when we were all together, but I could feel the shift happening. I could feel it in the way Ethan and I would catch each other's eyes across the room, in the way our conversations carried a different kind of weight, in the way I started dressing with just a little more care when I knew he would be around. These were small things, things that could be excused, but I knew what they meant. One evening, Ryan invited Ethan over again. It was just like any other night, just the three of us. I made dinner. The two of them talked about work and sports, and for a while, I convinced myself that nothing had changed. But as the night went on, I started to feel the weight of what was happening. Every time Ethan laughed at something I said, every time his gaze lingered a little too long, I felt the unspoken tension building. At one point, I got up to clear the table, and Ethan followed me into the kitchen. It wasn't unusual. He had always been the type to help. But when I turned to take a plate from him, our hands brushed. It was nothing, a second, a moment, but it felt like everything. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I saw the conflict in his eyes, the same conflict I had been feeling. We were standing too close, the air between us heavy with something we hadn't yet named. My heart pounded, so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Ryan called from a living room, oblivious to what was happening just a few feet away. Ethan took a step back, exhaling slowly. "I should go," he murmured. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That night, as I lay in bed beside my husband, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that moment in the kitchen, about the way Ethan had looked at me, about the way I had felt standing so close to him. Guilt pressed down on me, but it wasn't enough to erase what I knew deep down. I wanted more. A few days later, Ethan texted me. It was nothing significant, just a simple message about something casual, but I knew what it meant. I stared at the screen for a long time before I replied. I told myself it was innocent, that we were just friends, that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But even as I typed out my response, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Our conversations became more frequent. At first, it was just small things, inside jokes, random thoughts throughout the day. But slowly, they grew into something deeper. We started talking about things we never had before, about life, about happiness, about the things we wanted but didn't have. He told me about his struggles, about how he felt like he was always standing in Ryan's shadow, and I told him things I had never admitted to anyone, how sometimes, even in a happy marriage, you could feel alone. I told myself we were just talking, that there was no harm in words. But words have a way of building something dangerous. They create a space, a world separate from reality, where emotions grow unchecked, and that's exactly what happened. One afternoon, Ethan asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. It wasn't unusual. We had spent time together before, but this time felt different. This time, there was an unspoken understanding between us. I hesitated before agreeing, knowing that I was making a choice that I couldn't take back. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already there, waiting for me. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something else in his expression, something hesitant, something unsure. We sat down, and for a while, we pretended everything was normal. We talked like we always did about everyday things. But there was a moment when the conversation fell quiet, and he looked at me in a way that made my heart race. "I don't know if this is a good idea," he said finally. I swallowed hard. "Then why are we here?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." My breath caught in my throat. Hearing the words out loud made everything real in a way that it hadn't been before. It wasn't just me, he felt it too. I should have ended it then. I should have walked away. But instead, I whispered the truth I had been too afraid to admit. "I can't stop thinking about you either." For a long moment, we just sat there, the weight of our confession hanging between us. There was no going back now. We had crossed a line, even if we hadn't touched, even if we hadn't done anything beyond words. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't the action, it's the intention. I left the cafe that day knowing that my life was about to change, that I had set something in motion that I might not be able to stop. But the thing about emotions is that once they start, they don't just go away. And I was about to learn just how much I was willing to risk for something that had already gone too far. I wish I could say that after that day in the cafe, I came to my senses, that I saw how close I was to ruining everything, and made the choice to walk away before it was too late. But the truth is, once a line is crossed, even if only in words, it's nearly impossible to pretend it never happened. Ethan and I had admitted the truth to each other. There was no more pretending that what we felt was harmless, and yet knowing that didn't stop us. If anything, it made everything more intense. We told ourselves we would be careful, that we would set boundaries, that we wouldn't let it become something that could hurt Ryan. But those were just lies we told ourselves to justify what we were doing, because the truth was we had already betrayed him, not physically, but in every other way that mattered. We started finding excuses to see each other alone. Small moments stolen in between our normal lives, a quick coffee when Ryan was at work, a walk in the park where no one would question why we were together. And always, there was this tension between us, this unspoken knowledge that we were one step away from falling completely. But the thing about secrets is that they don't stay hidden forever, no matter how careful you think you are. The truth has a way of surfacing. I should have seen the warning signs, the way Ryan started looking at me differently, as if he sensed something had shifted, the way he asked more questions about where I was, who I was with. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, that the guilt was making me imagine things. But then, one night, everything came crashing down. Ryan had been working late more often than usual. It gave me more time to talk to Ethan, to see him, even if it was just for a few minutes. That night, I was home alone when my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Ethan, I need to see you. Can I come over?" I hesitated. It was reckless, more reckless than anything we had done before, but I wanted to see him, needed to. Me? Ryan could be home soon. "Ethan, I'll only stay for a little while." I should have said no. I should have stopped it then. But instead, I found myself replying, "Okay." 15 minutes later, Ethan was standing in my living room. He didn't sit down, neither did I. We just stood there, the weight of everything between us pressing in. "I can't keep doing this," he said quietly. I swallowed hard. Neither can I. And yet, There we were, still standing too close, still unable to walk away. He reached for my hand, just for a second, and I let him. It was the smallest touch, but it was enough. Enough to confirm that we were in too deep. Enough to confirm that we were past the point of pretending this was something we could control. And then, before anything else could happen, before either of us could make another mistake, Ryan walked in. The moment the door opened, time seemed to freeze. Ryan's eyes moved between us, taking in the scene. Ethan dropped my hand. I took a step back. But it didn't matter. I'll never forget the look on Ryan's face. Not anger, not rage, just hurt. Deep, undeniable hurt. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavier than any words could have been. Then, Ryan let out a quiet breath, and said, "How long?" His voice was calm, too calm. Ethan and I exchanged a glance, and in that moment, I knew there was no point in lying. I started, but Ryan shook his head. "I don't care if it never happened," he interrupted. "I care that it almost did." That was the moment I realized that sometimes betrayal isn't about what you do. It's about what you let yourself feel. Ethan didn't say a word. He just looked at me one last time before nodding at Ryan and walking out the door. Just like that, it was over. But for Ryan and me, it was just the beginning of the fallout. For days, we barely spoke. He wasn't angry, not in the way I expected him to be. He didn't yell, didn't demand answers. He just withdrew, and, in a way, that hurt more than anything else could have. Finally, after nearly a week of silence, he sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where Ethan and I had once shared glances that meant too much. "Do you love him?" he asked. The question hit me harder than I expected, because the truth was, I didn't know the answer. "I don't think so," I whispered. I swallowed. I think I just wanted to feel something different. Ryan nodded slowly, as if he had already known that. "And do you still love me?" Tears burned in my eyes. "Yes." He was quiet for a long time, then finally he sighed. "I don't know if that's enough." That was the moment I realized that love alone doesn't fix things, that sometimes, even if two people love each other, too much damage has been done. I wish I could say we worked through it, that we found a way to repair what had broken, but some cracks never fully heal. In the end, Ryan didn't leave right away. We tried counseling. We tried to rebuild. But no matter how hard we tried, there was always something between us, something we couldn't erase. A year later, he told me he wanted a divorce. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, just out of the quiet understanding that we were no longer the same people we had once been. Ethan moved away shortly after. I never saw him again. And me, I spent a long time trying to understand how I'd let it happen, trying to forgive myself for the choices I had made. Some lessons in life come too late. Some mistakes can't be undone. But if I've learned anything from all of this, it's that love is never enough on its own. It takes effort, attention, and above all, honesty, not just with your partner, but with yourself. And I had learned that lesson the hardest way possible.